homeschooling for the long haul. So we happily do it, and we love it. Muna, do you want to tell us why you do it?
Alhamdulillah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I started homeschooling. It was really, what do you call it, a wrestle for me to start. I grew up in public school. My mother was a public school librarian, and it had always been my intention to be like the mom who helped out in their classes when they were in public school. So what led us into homeschooling was my husband's work. He was working a job where he was gone 24 hours, 48 hours, and then he'd be home. And when he was home, the kids were in preschool, and they had very few hours to see their dad. And I met a couple of Muslim homeschoolers at the mosque. So in talking to them, doing research, and then also my daughter at the time was suffering from asthma, and every time she went to preschool, catch a cold, then we ended up in the hospital or ended up at the doctor's office. So some health reasons also caused us to start the homeschooling process. I went through a process of reading as much as I can and interviewing. I think I interviewed over 100 families. And in that process, meeting parents of teenagers and seeing the relationship that the teens had with their parents, which is so different from kids in public school, I wanted that for my family. So that's how we started our homeschool journey. I've been doing it for 20 years now, or more, alhamdulillah. Several of my kids were late learners as the process went on. And so that sort of changed the way we learned. We went from starting with school at home, which didn't work after about 3 months, and then eclectic learning into unschooling, not quite radical unschooling, back into a relaxed education. So sort of figuring out that I'm an education facilitator and letting my kids grow at their own paces. So some things they were advanced in and some things they were behind in.
Thank you so much. I think that it's really great to hear how you guys have come to this journey. When you guys, how would you help a new homeschooler? How do you advise them to get started? Just looking at the requirements from in Virginia, where we're located, or their state. What are some of the beginning requirements they should take into consideration, and some of the end of year requirements that they should pay attention to?
Do you want me to hit that?
Sure, go for it.
So in Virginia, or what I advise for most homeschoolers is to have 2 tracks when you're talking about homeschooling. One is what you want personally for your own family and what you want to teach your kids. And the second is, what does the state require? So in Virginia, it's language, arts, and math. In other states, you need to look up what those requirements are, depending on, every state has something different. Maryland has like a cooperative umbrella school that you have to join and different requirements. So Virginia is very easy. Language, arts, and math, and it's just showing proof of achievement every year. Proof of achievement can be achieved through either a standardized exam or an assembly of stuff that they've done throughout the year to show that they improved from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, so like a portfolio of work in language, arts, and math. Or you can get a teacher assessment, and there are teachers out there who offer that service for a fee. The second track that you should have is your own personal track. So there's a book I recommend called the Low Cost, No Cost, How to Write a Low Cost, No Cost Curriculum. And in there is a couple of worksheets that you can read through. I printed it out and had my husband fill out the questions, and I filled out the questions, and I meshed them together. And we figured out what it is we wanted our children to know by the time they were 18. And from there, it walks you how to walk it backwards in terms of what it is, how to create a curriculum from those answers. Yep, that's the book.
Yeah, I wanted to show. So this is what you're referring to when you're talking about kind of figuring out what it is that you want out of the homeschooling experience. And then for you and your husband, you guys did this separately, and then.
Right, there's this one, and I think there's a second page. Exactly, lifelong aims, those kind of things. So I pulled those together, and then we sort of figured out what we wanted our kids to know. And from there, we personally realized most of what they needed to know were life skills, and academics was pretty low on the list, because that's something you can pick yourself up into speed very quickly in high school and college years.
Ella, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, just really quick. So basically in Virginia, what you have to put in is a notice of intent. And it's a very quick worksheet that you do usually on a county website. You just put in your intention to homeschool your child so that they know that they're not going to be attending public school. Otherwise, they're looking for where your child is. And so you're going to put in a notice of intent, and you're going to give them a description or something about what you're going to teach them. And in the state of Virginia, it's very basic. You just have to write a list of subjects that you're going to teach. And that could be, just math and English, or you can add whatever else you want to that. But you also have to meet certain requirements. So as the parent, if you're the parent who is teaching, then you need to have a high school diploma. And if you don't have a high school diploma, you need to meet one of the other criteria, which is hiring a tutor for them, or hiring a tutor, or you can get, I forgot what the other options are.
Yeah. Having a college diploma, having a high school diploma, or having a teaching degree.
Or a teaching certificate, right. So if you're a certified teacher in Virginia, then you can homeschool your children as well.
Right,
So
but if you're a teacher, you don't need to submit what curriculum you're, if you're a certified teacher, you don't have to submit curriculum. As a high school or college, I would submit only language arts and math. I wouldn't tell them anything else that you were teaching, because then they're going to ask for proof in those subjects. What happens if you decide your kid isn't interested in that subject that you first put on the list? What if they change mid-year? And that's possible, right? So as a veteran homeschooler, I recommend only giving the state what is required, nothing beyond that. That doesn't mean that you aren't going to teach more than that. It just means that you're only providing to the state what is required. And
just to kind of let people know, all of the resources that are being mentioned today, we're going to share with everyone who's registered for the event. The document that I just displayed, the books that Mona's referencing, a few of the other resources that we'll share tonight. So we will email them all out. You guys don't have to worry about scrambling to copy things down or writing things down. Inshallah, we're going to email all out. So a big question for new homeschoolers, and when I was homeschooling for the first time, was what do I teach? How do I choose a curriculum? And just figuring out what's going to happen on the day-to-day. So if you could start us off by just helping us understand what should we teach and how you guys decided that, what curriculum approaches you both took.
I didn't purchase a curriculum. I purchased parts of things, and or I tried to borrow, because usually about 3 months in, you find that your kid no longer likes it and you need to switch to something else. Especially if you're a new homeschooler, you sort of try to, or at least I did, try to emulate school, and that just doesn't work. You are not a school. You are a parent at home tutoring your child, and tutoring is usually more like 15-20 minutes with another 15-20 minutes of them doing some kind of busy work to show that they may have learned what you taught them. Right? What do you think, Ella?
Yeah, that's true.
About it, right?
Yeah.
So, and you're lucky if you get from 9 to 12 done, and then the rest of the day is giving them free play where they're actually learning stuff. I don't know.
Yeah. So I actually do purchase curriculum, or at least I did at the beginning, although my background is in curriculum and instruction. But even with that being said, the hardest part about homeschooling is diving in head first. It's that first step, taking it, making that commitment and saying, I'm going to give this a try. So once you get into it, it gets a lot easier. But for me, that first year when I first started, I had pulled my children out, and I wanted something to give me that, as Khadija actually calls it, the safety net. Give me that feeling that, okay, it's a catch-all. If anything, at least if I follow this, I'll be meeting all of the requirements. And so in my beginning years, I did purchase Calvert, because I did the research, and what I found was Calvert gives you everything that you as the parent need to say to your child, step-by-step directions. and it gives you every subject matter. And then I also purchased alongside it Singapore math, so we worked on those together inside of elementary years. What I found very quickly was that I felt suffocated by it. I realized it's telling me exactly what I need to say, and all of these subjects are interconnected, so it's very difficult to move and say, you know what, we're just gonna, learn something different in science today, or it was hard to jump around. And I realized very quickly that my style is, if my child is interested in something, I'm not gonna just move on to the next subject matter. I'm gonna try to dive deeper into that. And so I found, that specific curriculum didn't work for me, but it works for so many other people, because that was highly recommended when I was first starting. So it depends on your children also. So you have to have an understanding of what your child is capable of doing, what their attention span is, how long they can actually sit and focus, how much dedication and energy you have into preparing that curriculum and to sit down with them. I found very early on, because I was also working, that I didn't have a lot of time to be involved inside of their curriculum. So I was always looking for something that I would put in the minimum effort and get the maximum results from them. Right. So that was really the core that drove my choice in any curriculum that I would pick up.
Yeah, I think I was going to say, one of the things that I got from, I attended a lot of homeschool conferences every year. And one of the things that I picked up from, what's her name? Jessie Wise Brown. She wrote The Well-Trained Mind, which was a very famous classical education book. She talked about when she was homeschooling her kids, in the end, there were times where she's like, if you just read to them 15 minutes a day, twice a day, and that's it, and just have them narrate back to you, where narration is where the child, it's like kind of like having a dialogue, or they're talking to you about what they understood from what you read to them. That was sufficient to help keep them up and having those conversations with them. So reading to them twice a day for 15, 20 minutes and having them narrate back to you actually was enough to keep them up in growth in terms of education. And there were times where I fell back on that because I was expecting, or I was nauseous, or I was nursing, or I was tired, or somebody was sick, and life just happens. Sometimes life just gets really crazy. So, and we did a lot. My kids were very visual spatial learners and very hands-on learners. So we did a lot of manipulatives and letting them play and letting them explore through getting messy. I set up centers in my house where we had audio centers where they were listening to cassette tapes with books where they read along, or they were just listening to stories while they were playing with Legos or doing puzzles, coloring centers, hands-on science with baking soda vinegar, food coloring, slime making. That's all education, but it's fun and they don't realize they're learning. So we did that for many, many years.
So are you describing, when you're describing the free play and the exploration, is that more elementary age, or is that more early childhood, like preschool and kindergarten, first grade? Trying to give parents an idea of the transition from like free play to more structured, and when do you guys do that?
My kids free played and explored all the way up through age 12, 13. I'd always talk to them about having that at 16, they're going to community college. And so somewhere between 12 and 13, we would really start, and they would be asking for it. It's funny, when you give the kids enough space to get bored and not hooked on electronics too much or at all, they start asking for stuff. And so that's when I would leave things lying around. But yeah, there were hours and hours where my son got to spend out in the garage playing with the air compressor and making rockets and spinning things. And I would get him appliances that he could take apart and smash, or you know, with his dad around, he got to play with fire and burn stuff up. I mean, he was really into destruction. But he learned a lot from that and became a mechanical engineer. I don't know.
So really letting them develop their interest. Ala, how about you?
So early elementary, I would say early elementary was a lot of play for us, and we definitely started to do a lot more structured things in upper elementary and middle school. So my kids, I mean, my approach is a little bit different. Muna's an awesome unschooler. I definitely have more of a eclectic schooling kind of approach at home, where I want them to do their core subjects. So I do find, especially as they grow older, I look for things that are more independent, where I don't have to be as hands-on. So for example, I use teaching textbooks, which gives a lesson, they do some drills, they take a test, and I get the results in my parent account. And so I'm not there watching them the whole time. I just tell them, go do a math lesson, and then they're done for the day. And they also, as they got older, they started managing their own schedules, writing down their own task lists, but they know what the expectations are. Of course, we've defined those for them. So you're going to do your English every day, you're going to do your Quran, you're going to do your math, and then we're going to have, you know, science and social studies or history, whatever we're learning, as electives. And we substitute that sometimes with Islamic history, for example. But a lot of what we did in early elementary is hands-on stuff. But I do also try to do the core subjects. Like, for example, right now I have one daughter, so I have two age groups that I'm working with. One is preschool and first grade for this year. And next year I have a middle schooler, a rising 7th grader, and a rising high schooler in 9th grade. So for the younger crowd, we're working on how to teach your child how to read in 100 easy lessons. So we're on lesson 12, we're 12% there. And I'm just amazed because I could see my 4-year-old starting to read, and I'm shocked because I was intimidated by the book at the beginning. And then when we started working on it, it works. So choosing the curriculum is not an easy task, I would say. I think it's something that, you know, changes with time, changes on, you know, what you're able to put into it, and it changes with what your child will sit through, because you do have times where, you know, they're not able to sit for long periods of time. Actually, can we put up
absorb it?
That slide, Adija?
The one about the age?
Yes. So let's just take a quick look at some research that had came out with the attention span. You're looking at early elementary, an average of 1 to 2 hours of schooling maximum per day. And then you're looking at middle school, where average for homeschooling is about 2 to 3 hours, and maximum in high school 3 to 4 hours a day. And then you can look at the recommended length of sustained attention, where, you know, this is not all, you know, in one sitting. You might do 3 to 5 minutes over breakfast, where you're teaching them something, or you're doing an activity together, and then you'll continue the rest of the day. So you kind of put it in spurts, you know, throughout your day. And for us, we really do it based on a routine. You know, we have our early morning adhkar. We do a little bit of, I always try to put the beginning of the day, the hardest subjects, or the subjects that I get the most resistance from. Mm-hmm. So writing and reading, those are our first. So those always get done first thing in the morning. And yeah, we're putting in 3 to 5 minutes. That's all it takes. And then they, you know, write a little bit, and, you know, working those fine motor skills, especially for the pre-K. Like Muna said, Play-Doh and other manipulatives where they're just playing around with things. It's something that really helps. I know one of the questions we had was, what do you do about children who are very hesitant to write? Well, you know, have them play different things that help with their fine motor skills, and don't force anything. If you feel like they're not ready, take a step back, give them more time, take a break, change things up.
Or do it together.
Or do it together, that's true. One other thing I wanted to show was at least in Virginia, we have a lot of people were asking about the benchmarks. How do you know what to teach? We do have the Virginia Department of Education website, where it lists out the standards of learning. And if you look at the right-hand column, you have a list of all of the subjects. And then you can go in by grade level and actually choose the different SOLs for each one. Now, those can look very overwhelming.
Yeah.
It is a long list, and you might feel like there's no way I can meet all of these SOLs. But the truth is, the schools don't even meet all of these SOLs. They meet the blueprints, the test blueprints that you see there. They teach to the SOLs. So when you look at that list, it's a much smaller list of requirements. And so you'll see that it's really not really that overwhelming, and it's not something that you can't teach on your own. So if you're the creative type, you can jump into here, grab this, print it out, and go find your own resources. Or you can say, I'm going to take this and measure it against whatever curriculum I decide to purchase and make sure that it meets these benchmarks. So, you know, up to you how you want to do your homeschool, but for me, initially, when I was first starting, I really felt like I needed to purchase something, you know, from somebody more experienced who knew what they were doing, to give me an idea. And then, you know, as the years went by, I, you know, backed off from that and just started creating kind of my own curriculum based on these standards that we have here.
Thank you, ladies, so much. Transitioning on to the next topic that really comes up, and you guys talked a little bit about this, is your routine or your schedule in a homeschooling day. Some of the parents have been asking in our Q&A, how do you balance the adult facilitation and the independence? How much direction do you provide? How do you even get them to the point where they're independent? And then maybe you could talk a little bit about, in your routines and your schedules, if you teach groups together, if you teach children independently, when you have multiple kids that you're homeschooling.
My schedule is more of a weekly schedule. We have Monday cleaning day, laundry day, where the kids are actually in charge of helping with the laundry, or actually they're in charge of the laundry completely in terms of sorting, swapping loads, loading, unloading, folding. That's their whole job. And then we rotate through in terms of cleaning. I use the clean team curriculum where they have the red juice, blue juice, and there's a whole DVD. And we learned how to do the bathrooms and the kitchen and the different parts of the house, and we take turns cleaning that around the house. So that's their Monday life skills. Tuesday is Tablet Tuesday, where they get to play on their tablets from 8 to 8, as long as they get their chores done. So everybody has chores in the house. But on the tablets, the apps that they're playing are mostly all educational or their team skills, like Minecraft. So they're doing like math apps, reading apps, that kind of stuff, as well as some fun games and Minecraft where they're building worlds together. So we used to host other homeschoolers before COVID, where they would have their friends come over and they'd all have their tablets and play building their worlds in Minecraft, which is, you know, it's interesting to hear them have these conversations, but it's definitely cool. Wednesday, Thursday, interspersed in those, on Monday through Thursday, we also have a tutor that comes in, or they have an online Quran class that they do. So my kids, their basics are Arabic, English, math, and martial arts. So, you know, I'm not a complete unschooler. I do have some core curriculum that they have to learn or do. And they have a tutor who comes once a week that does Islamic studies with them, or does some basic, whatever they're asking for. Yeah.
Carla, could you fill us in a little bit about how you approach that?
Yeah, so I already talked a little bit about our routine, but in order to manage multiple kids, I like to tend to the ones who need more attention first. So typically when I start, I'll begin with the younger ones and have a task or something quiet that the older ones can do on their own. And so if I'm working with a preschooler, I usually will combine them. The preschooler and the first grader will be together. And so I'll work on something that they can do together. So maybe we start the day with reading a story together, and then asking each one of them. So the first grader, I might ask her to write a sentence about it, while the preschooler, I might ask her to draw a picture of her favorite part in the story. So getting some comprehension out of it for both of them and getting different practice based on their levels. So kind of blending the learning wherever you can, and then, depending on the complexity needed for each child, you kind of divide it up. And then the older group, their middle school, so they would write their own task lists, and I would, they would check them off on the board as they moved along, and I would help them move along and just say, hey, did you do this? Did you do that? And if they had any questions, I would ask them what they were doing. But typically I like to finish most of the younger kids' homeschooling early in the morning. They're already awake at around 7 or 8, they're getting up. Then by 9 or 10, we're usually done with the core subjects that they have to learn. And the rest of the day is around, okay, they're helping in the kitchen, and we're counting how many carrots we're putting on the plate, or sorting different colors, whatever it is. But inserting the education into the rest of our day, but really the core of it, the part that makes me a little anxious to say, did we do it or not? I like to front load and get it done at the beginning of the day. And then the older kids, their schedules depend on what they're doing. And because I do a lot of a la carte schooling, where I'll purchase an English class or purchase a math class from here or there, their timings depend on whatever time those classes are. And then for all of them, I have them enrolled in some sort of Quran program or Islamic studies. So they'll log onto the computer at a certain time and enroll with their teachers and get some direction from them at that point.
Did you find with your kids, as they've gotten older, their sleep schedules have shifted?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the older ones definitely need more sleep, and I'm not waking them up. If they need that sleep, as long as they don't have a class early in the morning. But
yeah,
they
I
also
had to switch their classes so that a lot of times they stop their online classes and switch to doing stuff in the evening. So I had one kid do his schooling from 9 to midnight when he started in 8th grade, 7th grade.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, yeah.
So I'm just, people need to realize that as you are homeschooling, or if you're jumping in with middle schoolers, those kids are going to start body changing, and sleep cycles will change. And you need to realize that it's okay to do schooling late in the evening. If that's where your kid's alert and awake, and that's when they want to do it. So that's something to consider. I don't know if any of our new homeschoolers are only elementary, or if they're middle schoolers or upper elementary. That's a time shift for kids.
That's true.
So.
Yes. So one of the things that parents have been asking a lot about is the big thing, socialization. How do you make sure that how do you get kids socially comfortable? How are your kids socially? And even for you as a homeschooling parent, or as for you and your spouse, did you need a support group? Did you need a co-op? So how did you balance that for your kids and for yourself?
Yes, needed a support group of other homeschool families, and I actually ran a play group for a long time until it stopped being needed because there were so many more in the area, or people were doing like cooperatives. I'm definitely not a cooperative group thing. I'm more of just a play group kind of thing. So it was helpful. It's helpful if your kids if you don't have a couple of families that you sync with really well, then joining a play group or support group is helpful until you figure out. Once we've found a couple of families that we really sync with, then we didn't have as many outside activities, because we just mainly did it with those 2 or 3 families that the kids really really connected with. But socialization wise, I actually think public school is some of the worst kind of socialization. I think homeschool families are just your own family, and learning to navigate within yourselves is the biggest part of homeschooling. The interpersonal skills between children and parents, and between siblings, and the different personalities, and learning to respect each other, and to bring that amana, what do I want to call it? The respect of different kinds of personalities and people. Like, we're all one family, but each one of my kids is very different. And, you know, having a son who likes to tap on things and another child who can't stand to have him tapping on stuff and says, oh, he's doing that just to annoy me. And he's not, he's just being himself, right? And so, but he follows her around because he loves her so much and he wants her attention. So navigating the sibling dynamics is a huge part of homeschooling. And that was one of the things I really worked on was, you know, harmony in the house. If there was complaining or whining, there's something going on that's not good and we need to figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge part of it. Definitely the dynamics inside of the home. That's a huge part of socialization. But I think we can also add to that some of the activities that they do outside. Like we have, alhamdulillah, we're very close to Adams Center and we're very close to McLean Islamic Center, and we're very close to a couple of their masajid that all have a lot of activities going on. And so we can enroll our children inside of these activities so that they're still interacting with other Muslim children, but just not during school hours when they're at school. So we're doing after school activities with Girl Scouts. They were doing martial arts. They were doing all kinds of things on the side. Any event that popped up, community service things that come up, our kids will go out and do things like that. And then you really have to think about what are your goals for their socialization. For me, my goals of socialization is not that they can just talk to their peers. I mean, that's so minimal compared to the real world. When you get out into the real world, you're not just talking to your peers, you're talking to all kinds of people. And so for me, when before COVID, when guests used to come over, you know, my children, if they didn't come down and say salam, that was a big fail on my part. I felt like, you know what, you should know that when guests come over, that you need to do the proper salam. You need to be able to sit down. As these middle schoolers, you're a 12-year-old, you're a 13-year-old, you need to be able to sit down in the living room and carry a conversation with somebody who's an adult, you know, say, Assalamu alaikum, how are you doing? Thank you for coming. So again, it goes back to your goals on what socialization is. I think a lot of us think of it as, you know, that time that they spend in their classroom with their kids, but most of that time, the socialization that they get is very minimal. And a lot of it is negative socialization. It's like, let's talk while the teacher is talking. So it's there are elements of disrespect in it. There's elements of, there are some different elements in it that I won't go into detail about it. But again, you just have to think about what are your goals for socialization? And then you have to create the environment that you want. So definitely part of homeschooling, I always felt like, you know, we're missing out on all the things that other people are doing, and we're kind of in our own little bubble, and we're just in a cave, and it feels like we're alone. But what I found is, you know, you can say these things, but what it takes is action. You have to say, okay, well, let me start a group for, you know, 4-year-olds so that my daughter can play with 4-year-olds and I can talk to their mothers and we can all grow together. And so you have to put in the effort in order to get that support group out. And so I've definitely,
I agree with that. I mean, I did a lot of that before in terms of hosting kids in or going out. We used to do a once-a-week field trip into DC, and it was just fun riding the metro or taking, you know, one car in and walking through the different museums, and the kids giving the kids a chance to talk to the what are those people called, the ones that like take you around the museum? God, I can't even think of the word, but the adult that I'm
docent. The docent, Mona?
Yes, the docent. There you go. So, you know, just a lot of times the docents would come back to us and tell us, you know, we've never had kids talk to us that way. And so teaching your kids to talk to adults as if they're other people, right? Not this, you know, thinking of your kids as a little person and not a child, hopefully will help you talk to your own kids as if they're people and not someone who is not knowledgeable. So that give and take, we get out a lot, or we used to. With COVID, things have completely changed, but we still try to do stuff online in terms of Zoom and things. But again, I do a lot more visually or auditory or tactile whether
Yeah.
it's video or movies, discussions, play groups.
Yeah,
And
and we have some WhatsApp groups, right, that we talk about. You know,
Yeah.
we're all on. We,
Yeah.
you know, it
Please
helps.
share the big one. Feel free to share it now, and we'll also include it in our resources for families if they're interested in joining.
There's Nova Muslim Homeschoolers is a Facebook group. We also have a WhatsApp group, which is a homeschool hotline. And then there's a co-op group, which does a lot of field trips locally in our area, or used to. Hopefully it'll get back up, but that's PATH Co-op. And then we also have a teen homeschoolers group on WhatsApp. So all of those are resources that if anybody wants to join, you can send a message to you, Khadija, or
Yeah, they can also send an email, and it'll be included in our resources, inshallah.
Perfect.
So we talked about how COVID has kind of put a damper on a lot of the natural socialization that all of us have done, whether we go to public school or not, or we're homeschooling. Parents were just wondering if there are any websites or anything that you're using. And Ala mentioned a few right now, some forums for connection. But I don't know if you want to take a minute and mention like things that you did. I know, Ala, you mentioned Girl Scouts and things like that, but if there are any martial arts or other activities that you just want to highlight really briefly that your kids participated in?
My kids go to the U.S. Karate Center in Reston. We've been going there for 20 years, but he's not necessarily a Muslim instructor. I know there's the CELAT group.
Yeah. My kids were doing it with did medic in the CELAT group. So that's definitely one option. And he did move to online, so it was over Zoom. Kids were doing that. They're also doing they continue with their Arabic classes and things online, which also is one. It's a group class, so they do get some socialization there. And then I encourage them to pick up the phone and just call their friends and check on them. So they're getting some socialization that way. But what we're primarily doing is taking advantage of the early hours and late hours in the day and getting outside. One of the kids created like a walking group to call her friends to come walking, put masks on, stay 6 feet apart, and go for a walk. So you can do things like that. You can keep it safe and still create activities. I see my neighbors all the time have lawn chairs in their front yard. They're spaced out and they have people over. And so we can do a lot of things like that. And you just have to utilize the times of the day, since we're in summer when it's a little bit cooler. We like to go hiking as a family, so we'll do that as well. But you have to find those things that help you decompress from the stresses of the day. Yeah.
One of the parents asked, and I thought this was an interesting question that I'd love to hear you guys answer, is like, if you're having a play group for your younger children, what do you do with your older ones?
Do you want to start with?
My kids all played together. We didn't have just the little ones. Homeschooling is about being able to interact with people of all ages. So I assumed that my little kids would be playing with my bigger kids, and they all sort of intermixed. Did they occasionally pair off or break off? Certainly, but I would also encourage them to get back in together.
So this is actually an interesting question because I do have this age gap where I have these middle schooler, high schooler / and then I have younger 3 kids, a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. Sometimes you feel like if you're interacting with people who have older kids, that the younger kids really aren't welcome, or if you're interacting with people with the opposite, then the older kids are not welcome. And that's really not the case. I think it's something psychological for us. We feel like we don't want to burden people with extra children. But what I have a lot of times, if I'm doing a play group with my younger kids, my older kids are the ones managing it. I'm not. So, I'm like, are you guys going to bake something together? Have them manage it so that you don't have to do this much. And it's good for them. It's good bonding and it's good leadership skills. So we kind of look at everything as part of education, no matter what it is.
Yeah, this breaking into just that particular age group is something we got from schooling. That isn't natural life. When we get out of high school and go into college, you start interacting with people of all age groups, especially when you go to community college, because you've got people who are returning back into the workforce going into community college. You have kids who've just gotten out at 18. You know, you've got the whole age range. And same thing at university. I remember having some grandmothers in my college classes who were retired and coming back to do something else. So, and then when you get into the workforce, you're also dealing with people of all ages. So this itemizing of just one age group is something that we learn in school, and I think that's more of, that's a false reality. I don't like it. It creates that whole sense in high school where the teens think they're better than their parents, and the group philosophy of teenagers is better than the adults. At least that's what I experienced when I was in high school, and so I don't necessarily promote that. I think all age groups should be able to interact together.
Yeah, thank you ladies so much. I feel like my daughter, her classes that she enjoyed most were taught by teens, like her friends' siblings, and she just loved those classes so much. So so it's really valuable to have the different ages interact and in a natural way. To transition now, one of the topics that's come up a lot in our Q&A and just from you homeschooling families, just how do you manage parent breaks, time for you, and how, if you're a working parent, how do you find time to work? If you have to get things done and your kids maybe younger or whatever age they are, how did you kind of create an environment where you could have some breaks for yourself and also work if you needed to?
I hired other homeschool teenagers, or I hired my kids. So if I was actually working on a job, there was 2 days a week where I was working doing accounting. I would hire my older kids to be a mother's helper, whether it was like a couple of dollars an hour, you know, something that we negotiated in terms of paying them for those hours when I needed to really be incommunicado. And they were responsible enough to handle that. So that's one way of handling it. The other way is tag teaming. Like if one parent has to work at a certain time, then the other parent's negotiating the kids and then swapping. So I've seen some parents do that. This was pre-internet days where there are actually some parents who shifted their schedules so that they were day shift, night shift, and then having a few hours together in the middle of the evening. So it's possible. COVID has really messed a lot of things up, but it's also, I know there are people out there hiring people to come in to their homes to watch their kids while they're working. And again, there are, you know, if parents are up for it, there are, you know, middle schoolers, high schoolers who could, you know, be a mother's helper or a babysitter for a duration of time. Not necessarily every day, but a few hours or a couple days in the week is probably what homeschoolers would consider in terms of a job. What about you, Anna?
So I think you have to schedule your breaks in just like you schedule course subjects in or schedule laundry in. I think it's something that is critical. You know, you have to fill your tank first in order to be able to fill everyone else's. And so for me, I have, you know, a certain time of the day where I say this hour I'm off schedule. You guys need to manage. And they do, and they manage just fine. And I think at the beginning, before I started doing that, I thought, you know what, they're not going to be able to manage without me. They need me. But the truth is they can manage just fine without you for an hour. You can, you know, take a book, take a cup of coffee, go for a walk, hide in a closet, whatever you need to do to get your time away from everything and to recharge. So I do that every day.
I think it's also important to make sure your house is kid friendly, right?
Yeah,
if you have your house set up so that everybody's comfortable in it and that, you know, the 4 or 5 or 6-year-old knows and is capable of doing certain, like if you set the house up so that it's child or little people friendly, then
Yeah.
they're able to do much more than you realize that they can do without
can access.
yeah,
Right.
without needing your direct supervision.
Yeah, and things like snacks you can have, lower shelf in the fridge. You can, have stations of play out that they're able to access. But I think another thing that really helps, especially if you're working, is knowing that you have the flexibility. You're homeschooling. You can use the weekends. So you don't have to school them Monday through Friday. You can say, I'm going to double up on Saturday and Sunday, knock out 4 days of my week, and, focus on my work if I have a heavy work week coming up, and have the kids, again, have the house be ready and put some activities out for them to do and be able to focus on that. So you have that flexibility where you can change up the schedule, and then you can also leverage the evening hours and leverage the early morning hours, pray fajr, and then don't go back to sleep. Get some hours in of work, cook something for the family, do whatever you need to do. So leveraging your time wisely and using your weekends, you're really able to accomplish a lot more and get your breaks in.
Yes, definitely. So one of the things, just kind of, Mona, you mentioned hiring someone to help with, childminder or something like that. Along those lines somewhat, do homeschooling families ever hire teachers, whether it's a full-time teacher or part-time teacher? I think you guys mentioned tutors. What are the options for parents if they want to hire someone to teach all the subjects, certain subjects?
I mean, it's America. All of those options are there, right? Just depends on if you have the money or if you have a group of you who are willing to pull together. Many of the Hafiz programs, that's what they do. They have the Hafiz in the morning, and then they've hired a teacher who actually teaches all the core subjects in the afternoon after their Hafiz hours in the morning. And they, file under homeschooling laws. My kids, again, they're not interested in that much schoolwork, so I just do a couple of hours 2 or 3 times a week for certain things, and that's it. You've got the whole range. So it's a matter of figuring out what you want, what your child wants, and finding the blend and what you can afford in terms of your budget. Again, sometimes you can get a high school student or a homeschool student who's at a certain level of math or English to come in and tutor your own kid. One of the books I loved when I first started homeschooling was the 101 Questions for Homeschoolers. And they were talking about, like, for elementary school, you only need about 6 hours of curriculum study time in the week. 6 hours a week. I can do 6 hours a week. Can you do 6 hours a week from, for your kindergarten to 6th grade? Yeah. And then, so the amount of schooling that you need to get done is so much smaller than what you think. We're not talking school where you have, an 8-hour day. We're talking what would be tutoring through the week. You can get so much more done in a shorter amount of time. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yes. Ella, do you want to add anything before we move on?
I'm a strong proponent of purchasing services that you can't provide for yourself. So any subject that you feel uncomfortable in, I strongly suggest that you look for resources online. There are tons of options in terms of getting tutors. Even care.com, you can get a tutor on there. And OutSchool has a whole bunch of classes where you can get teachers, and there are so many programs online. But I think it's a really good idea to purchase any services that you need, that you can afford, to make the load easier on yourself.
So what if your child doesn't want to cooperate with a certain subject or in general? How do you handle any problems that may arise?
That's more of a relationship building. I think it's more about figuring out how to get you all together in a team and creating this positive family dynamic. I would recommend John Gottman's book, either raising emotionally intelligent kids or Making Marriage Work. in there are resources on how to create better dynamics within your family. But, you know, I had some core mantras that we played at our house, which is, what's the goal of life? Jannah. How do you get there? By making Allah happy. Well, how do you know what that is? You know, reviewing what the Quranic basis is. You know, that's the foundation of our home is, you know, respect. You know, believing in Allah, the Prophet, and respecting each other, and acknowledging each person as a person that we love and care for, building each other up, not tearing each other down, giving permission to my kids to tell me when I'm wrong, in case I've told them something wrong. That I'm human, I make mistakes. So if I can model apologizing and owning my mistakes, they too cannot, you know, follow that same example in terms of owning their mistakes, and it's okay. Making mistakes is how we learn. So that was another mantra at our house. I like it when we make mistakes. Mistakes are how we learn. As long as we acknowledge the mistake, you know, try to learn from that mistake, try not to repeat the mistake. And a lot of times there are things where I just dropped it. If they weren't ready for a particular subject, I would let it go for a few weeks or a few months and come back at it another way. Maybe the curriculum is not the right kind. Maybe you're coming at it from a wrong approach. Maybe they're just not ready for it yet. Try something else.
Thanks, Mona. Ala?
Yeah, so I think we have to always remember who our audience is, right? So if you're working with a young child and they only have a certain attention span, right? So we have to think, you know, have we sat them down too long? Are we expecting too much from them? So usually when there is some issue, especially with younger children, because children are curious and they want to learn. So if they're having an issue with something that you're teaching, usually there's some sort of cognitive overload that they're experiencing. And it could be based on different things. It could be the fact that they feel like this is too overwhelming, this is something too difficult for me to understand, so they start acting out. Like, okay, I can't sit still because I don't understand. And so you have to remove those barriers from them. You have to try your best to identify what's causing this
Angst.
Sorry?
I called it angst, this upset.
Angst. Yes. So you have to figure out what's causing it. You have to go to the root cause. Why? And try to figure out what's causing it. But definitely a huge part of it is what Muna said, you know, relationship building and, you know, coming together as a family and respecting each other. But then when it comes to learning time and you're trying to sit them down and they're not focusing, then, you know, they could just need a break. They could just be exhausted, or they could be getting too much stimulation at some time. So, you know, taking them outdoors, doing exercise, you know, changing it up. And then if you feel like, you know what, we've tried this 5-6 times and every time we come to it, there's a mental block there, then you got to change it up, try something different, find a different resource, go to the library, find them a video, do something hands-on, play with them, but build that relationship back up.
It could also be that the whole sitting still thing, they don't have to sit still to learn, right? Some kids are fidgety. They have to tap their leg, or they have to move, or they have to rub something. You know, that's what those little fidget spinners are all about, right?
Yeah.
Those little fidget spinners, they can fidget with the fidget spinner. So, you know, there was a book I read that talked about the different intelligences and different modes of learning. So there are some kids, and I had several of them, who could never sit still. Like if you told them to sit still, they're so focused on sitting still, everything else nothing would input, right? But when I gave them things to mess with, like for one of them, I put a treadle from an old sewing machine under their desk so they could constantly rock their feet while they were working on their math, right? They were able to then absorb the math because they were constantly rocking their feet. You know, so different kids
don't. I love that idea. I feel like I'm going to try that with my daughter.
Some kids have to move. They just have to move, right? So, you know, I got used to there's this little wobble board. I had a son, you know, again, one kid on the wobble board, and they'd just be on the wobble board, and we would call out numbers and we'd do our math backs while they're on the wobble board.
That's
doing
hilarious.
flashbacks.
When, my husband said that the kids should run around the house while they're reciting their ayah over and
Yes.
over that they're memorizing.
Yes.
And I was like, what? You want them to what? Come on, just sit them down.
Did you ever see
And
that
they
movie?
started doing it and they memorized so fast. And I was like, oh my goodness, that works.
Well, what's that movie, Queen Bee or Spelling Bee, where the girl is jumping rope and she's learning to spell?
Right,
And she's
yeah.
jumping rope and she becomes a,
Yeah, there's definitely merit there.
There is people who actually have to physically move while they're learning.
Yeah.
So if your kid is that way, feed that, so.
I feel it in the bee. Someone put it there. But yeah, you're totally right about that. And I think one of the questions that someone did pop up, and if you guys could talk about this briefly, is outside of just like normal child needs, do you ever use rewards, consequences, punishments, any sort of motivating techniques if you do need to get something done, or you felt like your child needed that extra incentive? Did you ever try something like that worked, or would you not recommend it?
I used them short-term sporadically. I didn't really like to attach rewards to things. I really tried to teach them to be proud of themselves. So when they did something, I wouldn't say, I'm so proud of you. I would say, you must be really proud that you did that. That's amazing how much hard work you put into that. So to more acknowledge their work and the hard effort, even if it was a failure, than to give rewards. Now, sometimes my kids would want to do those little rewards things, and if they suggested that, then I would follow it up. But I really tried to stay away from those star charts and things like that, because that is not I don't feel like it's promoting something I want in the long term.
We loved our sticker charts.
Hey, if it works for you.
Definitely helped, I think, with behavior. I mean, different children, some of them, it didn't do anything for them, but some of them, they really enjoy seeing that sticker and feeling like, oh, I earned this.
Mm-hmm.
So my only rule to myself was you can never remove a sticker. If they just earned it, no matter what they do afterwards, you can't remove it. So they loved it. And we used to do like 30 stickers. So it would usually take them a month. And then after that month, then they would pick a prize, like a $5 below prize. And they loved it. And it really helped during a really rough time when they were the behavior was just not there. So homeschooling every day isn't perfect. And you just have to be able to accept that and, try the next day. So the behavior chart, the sticker chart definitely helped us.
Yeah.
I hear both of you saying that you used these tools as a motivating and not punitive, but more in terms of like motivating and supporting rather than to punish or to like you said, you never took a sticker away. And so
Right.
they earned it. It was more about kind of building them up.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I did have some parenting discipline type things that I did that would be considered punishment. I think, there were times where I had them, I wouldn't necessarily call it a timeout, but like they had to sit on the couch until they could both come up with a story that synced. Like if the two of them were fighting over something, like you can't do anything until you both are on the ends of the couch and can figure out how to whatever. A lot of times it was a matter of having to take the time to sit down with them and listen to each side and then translate for them, like what one said, what the other one said, and sort of also come back to, look, this thing, you were roughhousing and somebody got hurt. You didn't intend for them to get hurt, but they did. So we need to learn to, there are certain key words that we used in our house. When someone said, please stop, then everybody had to stop immediately. If someone got hurt, we stopped immediately and went and get an ice pack to help them. And I taught them words to say, like, are you hurt? Do you need help? I'm sorry. I didn't mean for you to get hurt. Things like that in terms of help, and make it a safe space for them to say those kind of things. I really tried to catch the kids being good when they were doing something good. I would always, they're playing quietly. I would stop and say, hey, that's amazing. I'm so excited to see you guys playing together so quietly. Mashallah, loves that kind of atmosphere. You know, so if you catch them being good and acknowledge the good at any time of the day, it really garners that. And then I would give time out to things. So if the kids were fighting over I had timers on every shelf, and if the kids were fighting over a toy, the toy was in timeout for an hour, then it was in timeout for a day, 24 hours. And if they were really fighting over it, the toy was in timeout out of the, like, it was gone. You know, sometimes there's something that they'll get and they'll just fight so viciously over it. The third time, where if they can't learn to control it after 24 hours, you know, when they lose it, when it's gone into the thrift store, they learn pretty quickly that so there's some lines that you draw and you just don't cross them. So, but pick those lines carefully. Don't have a lot of rules, have a few rules, but very firm rules.
So we're at the 9:35 mark, but we have a few questions that are in our Q&A that I just want to shoot out to you guys and get some quick answers before we wrap up. One is, what about a 2.5-year-old? When do I start teaching my 2.5-year-olds?
You love them. You love them, and you play with them, and you read books to them, and you let them make lots and lots of messes, and you remember that 2-year-olds up until 5-year-olds are nothing but destroyers.
Read, read, read. That's what you do. That's what you do. You just keep reading.
Read, cuddle, play, messes. They are destroyers. Everything until 5, maybe just after 5, when you're 6, they're no longer destroyers. You can start to teach them not to destroy things. But yeah, they're destroyers and mess makers, and that's what they're supposed to. And if they're doing that, it's great, because that's their natural, what they're supposed to be doing. They're healthy.
What about habits such as submitting things on a deadline? You know, part of school is deadlines, deadlines, deadlines. So how do homeschoolers, are they good with deadlines? Is that something that's part of homeschool?
I didn't push deadlines until they were 15, 16, when they started college. That's when I started pushing deadlines.
No, I push deadlines. I'm a pusher. So, so I wanted things to get done, because I always felt like if we didn't, you know, accomplish what we needed to do, then we couldn't go and do the fun things that I wanted to do. And big part of the homeschooling that we do is because we want to have that flexibility to go on vacation, to pick up and go do whatever we want, whenever we want. But if they're not meeting their deadlines, then I can't do that. So they, alhamdulillah, like, you know, it's a struggle at the beginning, right? You're building habits. And so you have to be consistent for a period of time before you build that habit. And yeah, deadlines doesn't come in 21 days. You got to keep pushing it. It takes years and years to build it up. Alhamdulillah, they've been home for quite some time. So at this point, like, for the most part, they'll get it done. But no, we still have, that's a continuous struggle that we have. Definitely one of our biggest challenges is meeting the deadlines that are put for them.
But I feel like deadlines are negotiable, right? Like when I read David Allen's book, it's more like, for me, a deadline is a goal, and it's a target we aim for. It's not that we don't have them, we have them, but they're also negotiable, because life happens, things happen. People get sick, or something else comes up that's a better opportunity. So sometimes you can put stuff aside because something else better or more important showed up, and you can renegotiate those deadlines.
Well, in our safe environment of homeschooling, I think that's true. But I think the minute they hit college, their instructors are not going to take it as, oh, your car broke down again. These excuses that they come up with, it's not going to carry them very far in life.
That's not always true. I'll have to disagree with that, because when my son had a motorcycle accident, he was able to renegotiate deadlines with his professors, but it was only because he developed relationships with them. So it was one of the key things I learned or taught them early on, was when you start college, you go up and you meet your instructor on the first day and you start developing a relationship with them. You go to their office hours, even if you don't have any questions, you show up. So they know your face, they know who you are, you develop a relationship with them, so that when something does happen, you can renegotiate your deadlines. And that's exactly what happened when he had a motorcycle accident, and he was hospitalized for a couple of days, and he had, you know, issues where he had to push back some exams, and those professors actually gave him that time period because he had made that effort.
Right, right. And he had a legit reason.
Yes,
I'm talking more on lines of when there is no legit reason and we just got into a habit of thinking that we can find an excuse or an exit strategy and not meet our goals.
Right.
And that's where it's a problem. But definitely if there's a legit reason, there should be fine. But even in the workplace, when you miss your deadlines, it comes up against you. You know, that's part of your performance. So it's definitely something inside of post K-12 where they're going to need to have developed that habit of, you know, really pushing and meeting those deadlines.
Right.
Right. And it seems like you guys are talking a lot about habit formation, like habit building and good habits and pacing yourself and kind of developing those over time versus just having a deadline for the sake of a deadline.
I think the textbooks in terms of education deadlines, my kids formulated more so in their middle school, high school years. And it was more of the physical deadlines in terms of life skills that they had to meet in their younger years, right? I really gave them the physical life skills early on, so they had lots of time to just grow and be and get bored. So the life skills of getting the dishwasher emptied, washing the dishes, or cooking something, or laundry, or whatever, those kinds of things were deadlines they had to hit, yes. Curriculum-wise, those deadlines they had to meet definitely when they started, you know, 14, 15, 16, and in community college.
Yeah. So for the next two questions, my challenge to you is to answer them quickly. But the last one that I'm going to ask, I think, is kind of going to summarize just a lot of the things that you guys have already said. So I'm going to hold off on that. But one of the things we didn't talk about is space. Where do you homeschool in your homes? Do you have a room? I'm sure on Pinterest and all these things we see our homeschooling space, or do you homeschool all over the house? How do you guys manage that?
We homeschool everywhere. On the couch, reading a book. Sometimes they want to work on the floor. Sometimes it's, over breakfast. Sometimes it's on the dining table. I do have educational pods for each of them, just because, I'm a little crazy like that, but they rarely use them. That's the truth. It's where they store their stuff there, but they're not usually on their desks. They're usually, and sometimes, even the older ones will work on their beds. I do ask them to get up and to change their clothing in the morning, because I do feel like it has an impact on your productivity. So that is something that they do regularly, but they'll still work on their bed. So we do it everywhere. How about you, Mona?
It's fluctuated over the years. So that's the one thing about homeschooling, is how constantly it changes. Nothing is the same from month to month or year to year. And as your kid grows, where they're going to homeschool or where they're going to learn is going to change. It's going to mutate, and you need to be able to be flexible that way. So I tried to set up my home as if the whole home is all of our home, right? Originally I had specific spaces for the kids, and I learned that's not going to work. We're home 24/7, 7 days a week. The whole entire house is theirs as it is mine. So I have my own private space, and they have their own private space, but the rest of the general area is theirs. And I try to set up stations, reading areas, lounging areas, audio areas, video, gaming, whatever. But it depended on what age and what mood the kid was in, was where they studied. Once my kids hit college, they had their own specific space in their bedrooms or in the dining room. But before that, it could be anywhere. They could be learning outside in the hammock, or downstairs in the basement, or the couch, everywhere. So yeah.
Thank you, ladies. So final question, how do you know if homeschooling is right for you? How do you know if, so one of the parents was asking, I don't like a lot of noise. I'm really organized. I don't really know if I like teaching my child or teaching in general. Another question that was asked was, someone said that they read, anyone can homeschool, but homeschool isn't for everyone.
This is true.
How do you know that it's right for you, or that you're a parent that can homeschool?
You want to tackle that one first, Ella?
Sure. Just because I struggled with it. My husband says that before we got married, one of the questions that he asked me at that time was, "Will you homeschool our children?" And that I agreed and said yes. I don't remember that part, but so for a long time, from the beginning, from the time my children were born, he was saying, "We're going to homeschool. We're going to homeschool," right? And I was like, but I had a master's in education, right? And I should know my stuff. But I still pushed it, and I pushed it, and I pushed it for, the good 4 years when she was in fourth grade and the other one was in second grade at the time. Then I had a couple babies. It took me a very long time to accept or to even give it a try, because I was nervous that I wouldn't be able to do it justice, that I wouldn't be able to give my children the secular education from the dunya that they deserve to be able to be successful in this life. And so I did istikhara. I talked to a whole bunch of homeschoolers. And then I did a lot of research. And what I found overwhelming evidence of was that you didn't have to know much. You didn't have to have a background in education. You didn't need any of that. The only success factor that was in all of the research that I saw was loving and caring for your child and wanting the best for them. And I feel like that's in every mother. That's in, every loving parent wants that for their children. And so I just said, you know what, I'm going to give it a try. It'll make my husband happy, and we'll see if it works, it works. And even till now, I do it based on the fact that at any time we can go back to a school, right? That's why I want to make sure they're meeting all the benchmarks every year to say, if ever we feel like we're not doing a good job or that they want to return to school, that we can. I know you said to do it quick, so I'm going to stop talking. Go ahead, Mona.
Sort of this to answer your question, but there was another question on the thing that said, what do you find the most challenging about homeschooling? I think the answer for both of these questions is changing the way you think about schooling and education. If you are willing to be an adult and to do the research and to think about, to look at your child, really see them as a person and love them and care for them and want the best for them, and be willing to have conversations with them where you're willing to change the way you think about how education looks and what learning looks like. If you're willing to adapt and change and model adapting and changing, you'll be fine. The hardest thing about homeschooling is changing you the adult, right? And figuring out it's okay to not look like what you grew up in and to do something different.
Jazakallah khair, ladies. Ala, did you want to add anything else? Were you about to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing. I feel like it's something that we're taught to teach our children, to have a growth mindset, to tell them that even if you can't do something right now, that you will be able to do it in the future with effort and practice. You can master anything. And I think that applies to us first. As parents, I think that we need to have that growth mindset. We need to be able to say, I might not be the best one to teach my child this subject, but with practice and, giving it a try, I can do better. I can do it.
I think people also need to realize that their children are seeds, right? You're not going to make your kid into something. Your kid is already something, and you're fertilizing and growing and creating the space for them to grow into whatever it is that Allah wants them to be. So I think the school model is that kids are a bucket you fill up versus being a seed that you grow into something.
Thank you so much, ladies. I think this has been such a great start, alhamdulillah, to our week.